I learned the sound of hunger before I ever understood what love was supposed to feel like. It wasn't just the empty ache in my stomach. It was the way it echoed through the walls of our house every evening. I would sit quietly on the thin mattress in my small, dim room, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the clatter of plates and the soft laughter drifting from the dining area. The smell of freshly cooked food, warm bread, rich curry, sweet desserts, would seep under my door like a cruel invitation I was never meant to accept. "Don't come out," my mother would always say before closing the door. "You've already eaten," but I hadn't. Not really. Sometimes I was given dry leftovers, sometimes nothing at all. I learned to drink water slowly, pretending it could fill the emptiness inside me. I learned to sleep early so I wouldn't have to feel the hunger for too long. But the hardest part wasn't the hunger. It was watching my younger sister, Alina. She sat at the table like a princess, her plate always full, her laughter always welcomed. She wore bright dresses, had new toys every week, and never once had to ask for more food. Sometimes she didn't even finish what she was given. I would watch from the crack of my door as she pushed her plate away, half-eaten, while my stomach twisted in pain. Once, I gathered the courage to step out. "I'm still hungry," I said softly, barely meeting my father's eyes. The room fell silent. My father looked at me as if I had said something offensive. "You should be grateful we feed you at all," he replied coldly. Grateful, that word stayed with me long after I returned to my room. I tried to understand what I had done wrong. I cleaned the house, washed dishes, stayed quiet, studied hard. Anything to earn even a small piece of their affection. But no matter what I did, I was always treated like I didn't belong. One night, the question I had buried for years finally slipped out. "Why don't you love me like you love Alina?" I asked my mother. For a moment, her face changed, something uncertain flickered in her eyes. Then her hand struck my cheek. "Don't ever compare yourself to her," she snapped. "You're nothing alike." I stood there, stunned, my face burning, but it wasn't the pain of the slap that hurt the most. It was her words. "You're nothing alike." That was the night I stopped believing I was simply unloved. That was the night I began to realize something far worse. In their eyes, I wasn't just different. I was never truly theirs. As the years passed, the hunger inside me changed shape. It wasn't just about food anymore. It became a hunger for answers. I started noticing things I had ignored as a child. Alina looked exactly like my parents. She had my mother's soft brown eyes and my father's sharp smile. Even her laughter sounded like it belonged in this house. Mine didn't. Every time I looked in the mirror, I felt like I was staring at a stranger who had somehow wandered into the wrong life. My features didn't match theirs. My voice, my habits, nothing seemed to connect me to them. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, I knew it did. One afternoon, while cleaning my parents' room, I found something that would change everything. Hidden beneath old papers in a drawer was a sealed envelope, covered in dust, as if it had been forgotten on purpose. My hands hesitated for a moment, then curiosity won. I opened it. Inside was a document, official, stamped unmistakable. A DNA test report. My heart began to race as my eyes scanned the page. Probability of paternity, 0%. I froze. I read it again and again. The words didn't change. Further down, another line made my breath catch in my throat. Child shows no biological relation to tested parents. The room spun around me. My fingers tightened around the paper, as if letting go would make me disappear. This wasn't just an explanation. This was the truth. I wasn't their child. Suddenly, everything made sense. The cold stares, the harsh words, the empty plates, the constant feeling of being unwanted. It wasn't just neglect. It was distance, deliberate, chosen, that evening. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I walked into the living room, my hands trembling but my voice steady enough. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, holding up the paper. My mother's face went pale. My father stood up so abruptly, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. "It's about me," I said, my voice shaking now. "Don't I deserve to know?" For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my mother finally whispered, "We didn't want this to come out like this, then how?" I asked, tears burning in my eyes. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. You were switched at birth, she said quietly. A hospital mistake. The words hit harder than anything I had ever felt. We found out years later. My father added, his tone cold again. But by then, we already had Alina, our real daughter, real. That word shattered something inside me. So what am I? I whispered, neither of them answered. And in that silence, I finally understood the truth I had been living my entire life. I wasn't just unloved. I was never meant to belong. After that night, something inside me changed. I stopped asking questions. I stopped hoping, and most importantly, I stopped waiting for love that was never coming. The house felt colder than ever, but for the first time, I understood why. I wasn't invisible. I was simply unwanted. And strangely, that truth gave me a kind of clarity I had never felt before. If I didn't belong there, then I would have to create a place where I did. I began to focus on the only thing they couldn't take from me, my future. While my parents continued to ignore me, and Alina lived her perfect life, I buried myself in books. Late at night, when hunger used to keep me awake, I now used that time to study. The same emptiness in my stomach turned into fuel for something stronger, determination. I worked harder than anyone at school. Teachers began to notice. You have something special, one of them told me. Don't waste it. Those words stayed with me. For once, someone saw me, not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as a person with potential. At home, nothing changed. I was still given the bare minimum, still treated like I didn't exist. But now, their neglect no longer broke me. It pushed me. Years passed, and every exam I aced, every achievement I earned, felt like a quiet rebellion against everything they believed about me. Then one day, everything shifted. I received a letter. My hands trembled as I opened it, just like they had when I found the DNA report, but this time, the fear was mixed with something else. Hope. I had been awarded a full scholarship to a prestigious university. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This was it. This was my way out. That evening, I told them, I'm leaving. I said, holding the letter tightly. My mother barely looked up. Do what you want, she replied indifferently. My father nodded once, as if I had just informed him about something trivial. No pride, no congratulations, nothing. But this time, their silence didn't hurt because I wasn't doing this for them. I packed my few belongings that night, clothes, books, and the small pieces of myself I had managed to protect. As I stood at the door the next morning, I glanced back at the house one last time. For years, it had been a place of hunger, pain, and loneliness. Now it was just a memory. I stepped outside and didn't look back. College was a different world. I worked part-time, studied relentlessly, and slowly began to rebuild myself. People spoke to me with kindness. They shared meals with me without hesitation. The first time someone handed me food and said, "Eat, you must be hungry," I nearly cried. Because for the first time in my life, someone cared if I was fed. And in that simple moment, I realized something powerful. I wasn't broken. I had just been placed in the wrong place, and now I was finally finding where I truly belonged. Success didn't come overnight, but when it came, it stayed. Years passed, and the girl who once went to sleep hungry became someone who built her life from nothing. I graduated at the top of my class, earned a stable career, and surrounded myself with people who treated me with a kindness I once thought only existed in dreams. And then I found them, my real parents. It took time, months of searching, paperwork, and waiting, but the day I finally stood in front of their door, my heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. When my real mother opened the door, she froze. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then her eyes filled with tears. It's you," she whispered. I didn't even realize I was crying until she pulled me into her arms. It was warm, tight, and real, like something I had been missing my entire life, without even knowing it. "I never stopped looking for you," she said, her voice breaking, and for the first time I believed someone truly wanted me. They told me everything, how they had searched for years, how the hospital mistake had stolen me from them, how they never gave up hope. Unlike the people who raised me, they didn't see me as a burden. They saw me as a miracle returned. That was the moment I understood something deeply. Love was never supposed to hurt like it did in that house. A few years later, I made a decision. I went back, not because I needed them, but because I no longer feared them. Their house looked smaller than I remembered, faded, worn down, almost fragile. When Alina opened the door, she stared at me in shock. You've changed," she said quietly. I had to. I replied. My parents appeared behind her, older now, their faces marked by time. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then my father cleared his throat. "We heard you're doing well." I smiled slightly. "Yes," I said, "I am." There was something in their eyes I had never seen before regret. "We did what we thought was right," my mother murmured. I looked at her calmly. "No," I said gently. "You did what was easiest." Silence filled the room. I reached into my bag and placed an envelope on the table. Inside was money, more than enough to help them live comfortably. They stared at it, confused. "Why would you do this?" my father asked. I met his gaze, steady and unshaken. "Because I'm not like you." That was my revenge, not anger, not cruelty, but becoming everything they said I never could be. As I walked away from that house for the last time, I felt something I had never felt before when leaving it: peace. They had starved me of food, they had starved me of love, but they had failed to break me, and in the end, I didn't just survive. I became someone who could never be made to feel small again.